Back in 1983, the last thing the world needed was another plastic point-and-shoot camera. And it's probably the last thing YouTube need and all. Canon was already dominating the market, and Olympus had David Bailey and the Trip, Minolta, Yashica, Pentax, and nearly every other Japanese camera maker was painting the globe with these plastic point-and-shoots. Apart from Nikon, they waited, they watched, and they was patient. And then they came out with this, the L35 AF camera in 1983. And it took the other Japanese manufacturers by storm. Konica had already pioneered the autofocus years earlier, but when Nikon finally walked into the room, they didn't just want to compete, they wanted to completely smash the competition out of the ground. And Nikon engineers gave the project a code name, which was Pikachi, I think that's how it's pronounced, which basically means top notch in Japanese. And to make sure that he lived up to his name, they brought in a master optical designer called Koichi Wakamiya to build the lens. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Psst. No. Thank you. Wakamiya and Nikon's optical team went completely overboard. They crammed a 5-element sonar-style 35mm lens f2.8 inside this box. They gave it a stylish pop-up flash, and they also gave it focus feedback in the viewfinder. They added a thread for 46mm lens filters, and while the initial 1983 model was rolled out with a maximum ISO of 400 later on that year, or maybe early 1984, Nikon rolled out the same camera but with a 1000 ISO metering range, and that was a game changer for a lot of photographers. Many photographers back then thought that this was the king of the point and shoots. And I was really lucky to get this. I was walking past a charity shop the other day. I often walk in, see what cameras they got, and he showed me this. It wasn't even out on the side, it was underneath the counter. He said, we just got this in, and it cost me £5, and it works brilliantly. As you can see, this later improved model meters from 64 ISO to 1000 ISO, and there's no DX coding, which is a right result for those that bulk load your own film. There's an automatic pop-up flash and a charging light on the back. And this is the autofocus lens doing its thing. You notice that the lens is focusing in and out using the infrared sensors next to the viewfinder. In a split second after hitting the fire button, the camera focuses and then opens and closes the aperture. And looking through the viewfinder, you're presented with these yellow grid lines and the usual focusing symbols. That's my daughter Jess. She's about 30 feet away, and when I press the fire button halfway, a little black bar shoots across the viewfinder straight to the little mountains. And if I want to focus on a subject in front of me, I can simply lock the focus with my finger halfway down on a fire button, change composition, and then take my shot. Loading the film is easy. Just pull the film right past the little red sticker, close the door, and then hit the fire button, and the film advances to frame 1. And there's a small window which shows the film advancing as you take your photographs. If that red window isn't moving as you're taking pictures, that means the film has not been loaded correctly. There's a self-timer switch that takes about 10 seconds, but just don't forget to flick it back afterwards or you might think the camera's broken. And they also gave the camera a screw thread for 46mm filter over the lens, and the light sensor sits behind the filter if you put one on, so it compensates for any loss of light. And if you have any backlit subjects, you have a compensation slider which gives you about 2 stops more exposure. And on the bottom plate there's a little rewind switch where the film rewinds, leaving the leader hanging out slightly, which is ideal for those that are saving canisters for bulk loading their own film. The only issues I can see is the battery flap. It feels a little bit flimsy. I wonder how many of these cameras have got no battery flap. And if after watching this video you want one of these cameras, make sure that you look for the original 1983-84 L35 AF 1000 version. Unlike later models like the AF2 in 1985 and the AF3 in 1987, the original keeps manual ISO control, a filter thread and that classic 5-element lens. Just make sure you don't get the wrong one, as they look almost the same. And today I'm vlogging with a new lens. I'm using my Nikon ZF, which I always vlog on. I know some of you guys have got the ZF and a few different lenses, but I wanted to show you the TT Artisan 50mm f1.8 Neo lens, which you can see there. That's what I'm going to be vlogging on all day. It's an autofocus lens. It's very inexpensive comparison to the Nikon lenses, and so far I found it a really good lens. I've put a whole blog on my website if you want to know a little bit more about that lens. I'm not in affiliation with TT Artisan, just putting it out there in case anyone wants to find affordable lenses for their mirrorless cameras. So I've come off the downs and I've driven down to the beach just to get a few more shots. I've put another roll of film inside, which is Kodak Tri-X 400. So I need to change the ISO to 400. And this is good that you can change these speeds, because I can push or pull the film and be creative with it as much as I like. The camera also came with this little tiny lens cap, which also protects the viewfinder and the focusing eyes at the top of the camera. And it also came with the original bag, which is quite strange because the case is totally battered, but the camera is top notch. It's absolutely mint condition. The camera case is totally battered, but it's nice to have the case with it as well. So no doubt whoever had this, maybe they didn't use the camera as much, but took it out a lot. So I just took two photographs, one of a Cocker Spaniel, and the other one, as I was walking along, I saw this guy and he had this beard, and I just thought he looked great for a photograph. And I asked him if I could take his photograph, and obviously I haven't seen the photograph yet, so I'm thinking to myself, I wonder how well that's come out. If this was, say, a journalistic situation where I'm walking along and I've got my Mamiya and my other cameras maybe in a backpack, but I've got this little Nikon point and shoot in my pocket, and I didn't have the time to set anything else up and just quickly randomly took that photograph, I wonder if that photograph would be good enough for any sort of maybe magazine or news feed back then, which is quite bizarre because he said to me he published a book and it was about photography, science fiction film. So what's the chances of that? He said, I thought it was because you knew me from the book you wanted to take my picture, and I said, no, I said you look quite interesting. But I'll put a link in the description to his book if anyone wants to have a little look and be interested in that. What a nice chap. Hello, Jasper. You're a bit too close for me. Jasper? Oh, I think I've got it. Thank you very much. Yeah, cheers. A beautiful dog. I'm going to take some time out from vlogging and just take some photographs with this camera as I walk around. I can work better that way, and then I'll show you guys the photographs that I get from it. Try and get a few people in, see what we can do. So I'm going to put the camera in the bag for now, and I'll come back in a short while. I wanted to see how the autofocus did without looking through the viewfinder, and so I took these photographs while sitting on the bench from knee level, and to my surprise they actually turned out in focus. I love this one of the runner and the seagull, totally out of frame but interesting all the same. I hope they've come out nice. This will be interesting for me to see how these photographs come out. Like I said, just in case, you know, if I was doing any journalistic work and I had this in my pocket just for quick off-the-cuff stuff, would the quality, you know, hold up to its name? So I'll be interesting to see. But it's a nice camera to shoot, I must admit, and you know, it gives you a little bit more photographic freedom with changing the ISOs, and also you can see your focus points through the viewfinder. I think that's quite useful. You can hear the glass rattling up and down because the autofocus isn't locked in yet. Hear that? I don't know whether that should be right, I don't know. So it's all well and good making scans and throwing them into Photoshop, and I want to see how this comes out on a print. And I've chosen the photograph of the dog in the pram. When I saw that, I went running ahead of the guy, caught up with him, and I was laughing. I said, can I just grab a photograph of your dog in a pram, mate? He was laughing. He went, yeah, of course you can. It was hilarious. Well, I thought it was anyway. You had to be there, of course. But I'm going to put this under the enlarger and make a print. I'd like to see how this camera performs in the darkroom on print, so let's have a little look. This is Kodak Tri-X 400, so naturally I'm going to get a little bit of grain in there. It's a beautiful film. And there he is there, little doggy in a pram, and he's looking at me as well. I stopped and the guy stopped. So I've got that picture. Let's see how it comes out on a print. Yeah, so I find these little tiny point and shoots fascinating. It's not often that I shoot them, obviously probably the same as you as well. We've got our SLRs and we've got our lenses or our medium format cameras, large format, whatever. But when you find these little gems, it's nice to play. They're nice to play with. It's not really a camera I don't think that I would carry around all the time, because I've got sort of other older 1960s sort of point and shoots, if you like, that I like using. The lenses on those are fantastic, but I totally get why this camera was popular back in the day for professional photographers. Just something to carry in their pocket, you know, and if they're walking towards their job or whatever, or the journalistic and the documentary photographers, all their gear's in their backpack, and all of a sudden they've seen something along the way and they've gone, oh my god, whip the old L35 out, take the shot. And to me, it produces fantastic images. This print's looking really nice. And it's come out okay. I had to do another one. This one I just felt like it was a bit too soft, so I went a little bit harder on the contrast 5 just to bang that contrast out, and it's come out looking really, really nice. It's really sharp. Let's get a close-up for you. There it is there, hanging out to dry. Look how sharp that is. That's incredibly sharp. What a lens. I just love that photograph. The dog, he's got his tongue hanging out, his ears perked up, look. I wish the person's leg was maybe one step forward as though he was walking, but other than that, what a beautiful little camera to, you know, walk around with. I'm not too sure about any point and shoots that came after this. I'm not really into point and shoots, but when I find one in a charity shop and I think, you know, £5, £10, whatever, I think, oh, I'll have a bit of that. Supports the charity shop, and you end up getting the camera, whether it works or not. You know, I didn't know if this would work. I thought if it doesn't, then at least I can just put it on the shelf and keep it as a little piece, maybe try and fix it. But I was really impressed, and no wonder at the time photographers were saying this is like the best point and shoot at that time that there was. And you know, I have to research all this stuff. I don't know anything about these cameras, just like anyone else. I go online and I research all the history about them, try and find out a bit more, who used the cameras, what were they like in the day, what sort of person would have bought the camera, how much were they, and I find all that sort of history interesting. You know, it's just researching about things that you love and enjoy, which is photography and cameras. And actually with that dog shot, I overexposed by 1 stop because the sky was quite bright. So instead of using the slider, which would have given me 2 stops overexposure, I just used the ISO control and opened up to 200 ISO instead of the 400 that I was shooting. And I did the same with the couple that I was talking to. That wall, you notice, was bright white in the background. I took a shot, and then because I just thought the camera's going to account for the metering on that bright white wall and maybe make his skin tone dark. So I took 1 shot, and then I took another shot using the slider and overexposed by 2 stops. But that was overexposed, it was too bright. So it meant that the camera did a really good job metering at the first shot. So let us know in the comments, guys, if any of you have got one of these cameras, or if you had one, or maybe you heard about it at the time back in 1983 and maybe it was too expensive, or maybe you just didn't want to buy one. Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know, and other people would as well, so we can learn about these old cameras. I've also got to say a massive thank you to one of my Patreons, Tristan Colgate, who sent me the Olympus Trip. He saw the video that I did on the Olympus XB3, I think it was called. I'll have to correct that in the title if not. And he said, dear Rog, he said, try this one for size. And he sent me an Olympus Trip, which is, there was a couple of versions, I think maybe 2 or 3 versions of the Trip, the earlier ones in the 60s. And this one is kind of like mid-70s going on towards the 80s. So I'll be making a video on the Olympus Trip next. I've never used this camera before, and I'm quite excited about giving this a little trial run and showing you guys the Olympus Trip, which, as we all know, is well marketed and fantastic camera, brilliant lens on it as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video about the L35AF. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.